Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two and figuring out just what is going on is a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This episode we're finishing up A History of Wild Places by Shea Ernshaw. So Taylor, I was reviewing the theories that we had from the last episode, and I actually feel like we didn't do a bad job.
Definitely not a bad job. I definitely think you were way more on it than I was.
Yeah, I feel like I was I was adjacent on a few things to the actual. I feel like one thing I'm feeling about this book off the bat is that it probably was more predictable than I was anticipating or hoping for. Not that I thought that made the book especially bad or anything, but I we had kind of made a comment last episode about I don't think these two main characters are Maggie and Travis, and they were. But there's some other places where we were on the right boat. The fact that Maggie and Travis were in Pastoral as other people we definitely had. It was just a matter of who they were.
Yeah, and there were some weird things we also got right, like B's sight. I had a feeling about that. Turned out to be right. I think my greatest folly was I just expected there to be more magic.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like because it had what was the label? Was it magical realism or just magic?
That's what it was on Goodreads.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that.
I don't know if I would either, because there's just one instance of magic. And it's not even a necessary inclusion.
Yeah, it's really just part one, right? Is really where the magic is. I don't know. How are you feeling about the book overall, having read it? What are the initial end of book vibes?
Yeah, so it's the usual case in which the first part was pretty good, having a good time. And honestly, reading into the second part was also a pretty good vibe. I was excited. There were some crazy things happening that I was not expecting, but it was fine. It kind of fit within a book like this. And then the ending happened, and I'm a bit disappointed. I'm a bit unsatisfied, as I usually am. But, here we are. What about you?
I would say overall I had a good time. Definitely a good time reading it. I feel like I was engaged the whole time. There wasn't really a part of the book where I was is this boring? I feel like there's been some moments with some recent books where I felt that way. I think it was engaging the whole time. Definitely felt a little bit weird. Less so at the end of the book, but more at the end of the second to last part, as far as resolving them leaving Pastoral and sort of the B and Levi section of it. There were just some comments and some events that rubbed me the wrong way, but I would say overall didn't ruin the book for me by any means. So we can start by chatting a bit about Maggie and Travis / Calla and Theo and kind of their journey to figuring out who they are. So I think you mentioned this last episode. So Theo has this pain that he's been feeling, and kind of when I started reading about this again, I was like, man, maybe this is really the sign we should have been looking for, that he was Travis. But I guess that actual source of the pain is this fight that he and Levi had that we don't ever see and actually happens after any of the part one Travis scenes. So I guess it's totally disconnected from his ability, which I thought maybe it would be.
That would have been interesting. Yeah, I had thought it was. I don't know if I kept this in the episode, to be honest, because I had been he has a pain above his left ear, and it's very strange, and I had felt it got brought up before, but I thought by a different character. So I thought it was a general, they're all having memory issues type of thing. They are, but this specific pain he's feeling is because he does get into that fight with Levi, and we get told about that fight in a note. But yeah, it did have significance. It wasn't just a weird detail. It felt, I don't know. It gave me that feeling that it was going to be important, and it was.
Yeah, no, that was a good catch because I would have probably not paid any attention to it.
Yeah, it's just so specific.
Yeah, your eyebrow raises a little.
Yeah, but that is jumping ahead. That's one of the seeds, I guess. There's a couple different seeds that get planted about these characters being Calla and Theo and Maggie and Travis and things like that. We get the pain, we get Calla starts to feel this longing for something else, similar to what Theo is feeling. So, they're both kind of feeling drawn to the outside world. Not that it matters at the end. Theo is remembering parts of the Foxtail books, and Theo also uses some magic. Well, magic, quote unquote. He sees like an after image of Maggie with brown roots. So obviously her hair was dyed blonde. We were right about that. That's crazy.
That was a good call. Mm-hmm.
We get like those little things, and then eventually we just get like the full confirmation that they are Maggie and Travis. And it's like, oh, well, we kind of had a feeling. So
yeah, I will say it was like at the point that we realized that for sure, or like that we get the confirmation with him getting the vision, I guess is kind of the confirmation before the confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like I kind of just knew what the rest of the book was at that point, which I was wrong about because I didn't know anything about what was going to happen in part 5. But otherwise, I felt like that's when the rest of the arc kind of gave itself. It's like, okay, obviously if these are Travis and Maggie, like they're going to have to get out, return to the outside world. They've been talking about busting out, and B is interested too, so they're all probably going to try to bust out. There's going to be some drama with Levi because there's no way we're going to leave this pastoral, storyline unfinished. So I felt like it really pieced itself together from that moment. It wasn't, and again, I don't think it was boring to read despite knowing that, but I guess I wish it was held off a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think there's a way where you could have had like the hints of these things happening, and it's still interesting. It's a weird line to balance because there is like sometimes you're frustrated because you as the reader are like, how are you not realizing this is the thing that's happening?
That's a good point.
But this scene of them just kind of realizing and talking about it, and then that it's kind of settled, like they're Maggie and Travis kind of like they kind of just settle into it and it's whatever. And then also Levi like admitting to everything he's done, like there's such almost flat scenes that don't feel like adequate payoff. I don't know, like we know these things are happening. We know Levi's doing something to the town. We know Calla and Theo are not who they say they are. Like there's some kind of way to ride that kind of suspense throughout the entire book in a better way without having to have like those things flat out said, especially so early for the Calla and Theo thing. Like because it started off as a mystery of like what happened to them, and that felt like the big draw of the book, it resolved in a weird way. And it did I don't know how I want to talk about this, like because the notebooks also felt like it just, I guess, I don't know. It felt like a mystery that wasn't built to last because the notebooks ended up feeling like a way to prolong it because it had to be prolonged. Like they weren't actually that important. And they were, I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, I guess it turned it into a bit more of a scavenger hunt than a mystery.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah.
And so then you end up just getting these moments where you're like, oh, now we just know this thing because there isn't really another way to, I don't know, at least in my opinion, like the only way for them to figure this stuff out is to know what happened in the past, and this book has decided not to show us flashbacks of those things. So that's the way we find out is that's the only way is like we're getting messages from their former selves, and therefore like that's when you get into we're being told this information, and so now we just suddenly know it. I feel like I can like give the pass to that though, like given the structure of it. Yeah, it's for me, I think it was maybe, I don't know, maybe you're right though, like maybe it's that it was too early, and maybe it is that it was just like, and now we know this.
Yeah, I also think it's because like the characters didn't really do anything. There was a lot of them like thinking about the situation of they're in and thinking about investigating what happened to Maggie and Travis, and like Calla especially is like, we need to figure it out, but they don't actually, like Theo talks to Levi about it, which like mistake, but they don't actually investigate Pastoral. Like for an entire town seemingly that can survive on its own, we don't really see much of Pastoral.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We don't, like Travis does, or not Travis, I guess Travis. Theo doesn't even go back to investigate the truck. Like, I feel like there's just like active things they could have been doing.
Yeah.
To solve this, but they didn't. So it felt, it took too long for them to figure it out, and also did not take long enough for them to figure it out in like a weird way. Because Calla basically finds everything she's going to find in a couple of chapters, and then she just kind of sits with it for like the rest of the book.
Yeah, it's true.
Also, the fact that it is her handwriting, I got that right.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I guess it was different enough. She just did not recognize it. But the fact that nobody thought to investigate the handwriting. Like, they didn't think about the
Yeah.
handwriting at all after they confirmed it wasn't Travis. Like, that kind of investigation stuff just wasn't happening, I guess.
Well, there was also this whole thread in this book of like keeping secrets.
Yeah.
And so like they didn't even like, the only reason that Theo ever looks at the book is because he like snags it while she's asleep, right? Like there's no actual collaboration happening here, which is of course stunting their ability to make progress on it.
And B, she did meet Travis, like, and I feel like that wasn't discussed enough. The fact that she met Travis in the sunroom, and yeah, she didn't see his face, but like I think you mentioned in part 1, like she would notice if there was like a heartbeat that was new in the town, or like just like her, I don't want to say dissatisfaction, that's not the word I'm thinking of, but like I guess discontentment with like new people in her house, like her memory not being what it's meant to be. Like she was experiencing that absence of memory, but like she didn't really deal with that at all, because I feel like her story became so wrapped up in Levi, which like makes sense, but like the romance part of their relationship, I guess we did not need to deal with as much as we did, I think.
I think I have a big frustration with one aspect of this book where like it feels like all of the information or like all of the connection points do exist for so long. Like Theo has been out past the boundary for a year and hasn't been sick, but they still kind of refuse to accept that the rot or pox might not be real. And like B has all of this inside information about Levi's background, childhood, because they've spent their whole life together. Like all that really needs to happen is Theo needs to start talking about how he was past the wall, and B needs to start exposing Levi's like personal life. And it's over. Like they could have just been utilizing the information they had so much sooner. And I know this is like more on the side of taking Levi down versus uncovering their own past, but I think they're kind of interconnected. Like they weren't really taking action on the information they had to get what they could get out of it. And I felt like, especially when like, we'll get to this later too, but like the hanging and stuff, like just the lack of just the inability to say anything and like lean towards just keeping shut about everything didn't actually really serve them.
Yeah, I think it's like the difference between actively participating in the story and things kind of happening around you. Like there were a lot of instances where it feels like things are just happening to these characters, or they're not doing anything and like time is just kind of passing, I guess.
Right.
Because like the Ash and Turk situation is a perfect example of that. Like, and part of it is they're being like hypnotized, they're falling into this lull and stuff like that, but these people are being killed like for days in front of your eyes, and you know they might not have anything, or like the people you're like, if you're Calla, you're spending time with two people who could also be sick, and it's like just that disconnect, and like all she does is give them water and then nothing else, and they don't. And she says, we need to do something to help them. We need to do something. And it's like, great, okay, so do something. Like,
right.
Do something, right?
Yeah.
They don't do anything. Like, even at the end of this book, they don't do anything to help the people of Pastoral. Like, that's not why their choices are made. The only choices they end up making are for themselves, which is, like, fine. Like, if you need to save yourself in this kind of environment, girl, please, save yourself. But they need to be more active, I guess, in their own story, instead of being so absolutely passive about everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we basically talked about it, but we can just go right into the Ash Turk situation if you want to. Like, Levi Pastoral. Levi was the evil.
Shocker.
Yeah, nobody's surprised. And we do get insane scenes in which Ash does try to go and save his baby. And you know what? Calla and Theo are like, go ahead. Like, we support you.
Not enough to try to save them, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, not enough, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think Calla briefly is like, we need to break them out of Henry's barn. And I think Theo is like, we can't do that. And then that's it. And then they're
that's
dead.
Basically all that happens. Yep.
Yeah. So they have to go through the ritual, which is them being buried, which, crazy. Their arms tied above their head.
Yeah, when the chapter ends and he's like, we'll bury them, I was like, okay, so does that mean you're killing them? Which, I mean, yes, but like, it's not. I didn't realize that this was what the ritual would be. I honestly thought it was going to be something much more violent than this. Not that it wasn't violent, but this was just bizarre.
I remember them bringing up blood before, so I knew it was I thought they were going to do some kind of like bloodletting thing.
Yeah, me too. This is another part where I get frustrated too, because it seems pretty early on known that this, especially by Calla, that this is really punishment more so than it is like a healing ritual. And that's like one of those things where I'm like, you really could have just said something then, because you're watching it happen. You're kind of, I don't know. I take issue with the amount of collective blame that's happening in this book, but I will say this is a moment where I'm like, you guys really had a chance here.
Yeah, because the weird thing is, like, if there had been magic, I would have been like, okay, they're being controlled by something they cannot fight against, this magic. Don't be crazy here. But it's just hypnosis. And I say that as somebody who has not been hypnotized, but like, if the whole town revolted against Levi, could he hypnotize them back to submission? I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think he'd be so worried about control if that were the case. I think he knows it's fragile.
Right, because he's even worrying now about losing control, and he's seemingly hypnotizing them all the time. Like, they are in peace, and he cannot keep them hypnotized. So it's like, they have to be able to do something. The way in which they're acting like they're completely helpless is a little crazy to me, to be honest.
And even, like, the village folks are, like, chattering with each other kind of subversively about it, right? So, it's beyond Calla and Theo, like, other folks are just kind of letting it happen too.
Right, because in the beginning of the book, Birdie's son, like, touches the border or something, and she doesn't say anything about it because she obviously does not want this crazy ritual to happen to her kid. So it's like, it's not like he has them completely, like, zombified and he's controlling their every action.
Yeah. So before Ash and Turk are finally killed, Ash has this whole monologue about people like feeling like, oh, like you guys would rather like be locked down and safe than like see what's out there in the world, like you're not like making rational decisions, you know, like we should really be like trying to help in a case like this. And I felt like there was some weird like political layers to this. The one I was thinking of, I feel like there's discussion about how Americans generally like don't do a good job of traveling to other places and seeing what the rest of the world is like. And so, and maybe that's in part because we're not exactly next to a ton of other countries, but even then we don't go to those ones. So, like we tend to limit ourselves on cultural exchange that doesn't happen right here next to us. And even when it does happen right here next to us, Americans at large can be pretty lean towards rejection. So I kind of thought that was the route that this was going, is like, oh, like you refuse to like engage with the rest of the world and understand what they are like because you fear like that's going to change your own perspective instead of leaning into a perspective change. I don't know if you got that from it.
I didn't. I think that would have been interesting if the end of this book was completely different, because they do end up staying where they're safe and not seeing what's out there. So, you know.
Yeah, it made more sense in the moment, honestly. But you're totally right, like with the book ending the way it does, like it doesn't scream that. I do have some thoughts about the end of the book that maybe still let it work, but it's not super strong given the end. You're right.
It is interesting that Levi let him say it, though.
I thought so too. He kind of just ignores it. He's kind of like, okay, and then just like moves on.
Yeah. Doesn't really matter. No change happens. They die.
I also felt like Levi was actually doing a pretty bad job here with this move, because to me the message it sends is like, if you're gonna leave, just leave, because like don't be convinced to come back because this is what's gonna happen to you. And I almost thought that in the moment where he was convincing them to come back, I'm like, you guys are already screwed at this point, like you should just go. So I feel like the message it sends isn't don't leave, it's like, if you leave, commit. Yeah,
it is absolutely a punishment. And I think they try and like convince themselves it's a mercy, because then they don't have they don't have to die slowly by the rot.
Yeah. So another thought I had too with this execution is, so they use Bee's like ability to hear more carefully, I suppose, to identify Colette's baby is sick, right? They never use the same ability to see if people have the pox.
Yeah, I mean, during Bee's chapter, she is, like, trying to hear, but because they've been buried in the ground for 3 days, like, it's hard for her to tell if they're sick or if they're just, like, dying from, like, hypoxia, right? Like, she cannot tell. So I feel like that's kind of the point.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, originally originally I thought that that's what the 3-day burial was supposed to do, is to make them sick so that way they'd justify killing them, but it didn't actually matter because he was just going to make it look like they were bleeding black anyway. So it didn't actually matter whether they were physically sick or not.
You're right. That's what I thought. Like, the fact that they had their arms tied above their head, and that's where Levi cut into them, and that's where, like, the black blood came from, I instantly, like, was like, okay, that's interesting that that's what's happened. And then I started looking into, like, blood and shit like that for way too long because it didn't matter. And we started, like, trying to find an instance of, like, where that would make sense. Because it's weird. 3 days, arms above your head. You're losing all feeling in your arms. You're probably losing your arms, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that's where you're being cut into to see if your blood is healthy. Like, I don't know about that. I don't know if that works out. But yeah, like you said, it didn't matter because he was gonna show whatever he wanted to show. Honestly, I would say it doesn't even matter that they were buried, but obviously they were buried because they needed to be punished.
Right, exactly.
Because he could have instantly convinced everybody they were sick, like that night.
And they put them in the middle of Pastoral, I think, too. That way they're on display and people know not to do it.
Yeah, there's like a crazy moment that happens in the book where like these men get hanged by like this important tree in the town, and then like 2 nights later, Levi gets married to his new wife, and she's like tying this like bridal braid onto this tree, and it's like, men just died there, and
Yeah.
we're acting like it did not happen.
I mean, obviously, like the whole wedding thing it's to rewrite over that, right? But
yeah,
that is a particularly bizarre part of it, where she's just like kind of dancing around and like she and her friends are all having a good time at the same tree. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, like those instances in the book are like, I think, well done. Like, they're heavy-handed. Like, obviously something's off. Everybody can tell something's off, but like that's the point of this kind of like cult book. Like, you're supposed to feel like something is off. I just wish like the characters did anything with that feeling, I guess.
For sure. I think Alice is like the perfect, like there's the whole thing of like why she is chosen to be Levi's wife, and she really is like the perfect sheep, right? Like, I think that's why that works especially well. It's like, to her it's just like another day on the commune. Like it's given kind of, I don't know, airy, you know. there's no thoughts behind it. It's just living in the moment and like doing what she's supposed to do, like following the path that was laid out for her. And I think that's like, they had to, like, the author wrote this character to be kind of the pinnacle, and that's right. That's why she's getting married to Levi. I just thought it was interesting. We don't really see enough of her to like, for her to be the shining example, but that's definitely what she is.
Yeah, I'd be curious to like know who she was before and like how much Levi might have infected her, right?
Yeah, like how much did he form her to become that person?
Yeah.
Yeah. That brings up a question I had in general of like, I wonder how many other people beyond Theo and Calla were like people who kind of got stolen away, I guess, into Pastoral the way they did.
Yeah, anybody new, it's possible Levi would have done that with. Or it's possible he did it with everybody.
Yeah, that too, honestly. Like, how much of this is just him in charge of an ant farm and losing control of the ant farm he made, you know?
Yeah, because the interesting thing is, like, Cooper, the old founder, was, like, leaving Pastoral. Like, he didn't stay there all the time.
Right.
So it's like, did the people who came with him, or, like, who had come during his time, they might be more, like, transitory? Like, they might come and go with more ease, or they might have, like, still have things they want on the outside. Like, what were their names? Lyndon and Rose from the first part we talked about. Like, they were willing to leave because it wasn't a big deal to them. Or they knew of the outside world, and Levi might have been like, we don't want any of that. Like, he didn't even want people to know what was out there, so he might have changed everybody's memories.
Yeah, I think even if he didn't change, like, their whole, like, personhood, like he did for Theo and Calla, that he did at least, like, employ long-term memory adjustment, so that way those folks who would have known of the outside world were forgetful enough to truly fear it.
I think that makes the most sense. We don't necessarily get confirmation of that, but it would make the most sense, which is why the ending of this book is even more crazy, to be honest.
Yeah.
I guess to finish up Levi and B's story, we can kind of talk about all of that, maybe? I don't know.
Sure.
we obviously get hints that Levi is the devil. We get like him being compared to darkness a lot of the times, or B like calls him her shadow and shit like that. And you're like, oh, okay, so he is the evil of the woods. I understand. We knew from the beginning, but we'll play along. The interesting thing about this, though, is B starts to see things a little bit, and then eventually everything.
Yeah.
Crazy, to be honest.
It's just crazy that the stance here is that she's blind because he convinced her to be.
Yeah, I mean, he hints at it. He's like, you've always wanted to leave. It's why I had to, ... And you're like, had to what? And it's obviously like, why I had to make you blind. I thought it was poison when I talked about it.
I definitely thought there was more poison in general in this book than there ended up being, which is none.
Yeah. He did just convince her over time. And she has like flashbacks, I guess, about this, of him like practicing on her, like, and reading through his hypnosis books and like all of that stuff, which I guess she had forgotten about before because that's what he wanted.
Yeah. That one was a more difficult one for me to accept, because that seems like something she would question in the moment, you know? Like, not 10 years after when she's forgotten all of it.
Yeah, I think it's like at first she's in love with him enough that hypnosis and card tricks just seems like fun magic to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And then by the time she would actually want to question it, she was already blind and also had forgotten everything.
I feel like when that happened must have really been a big turning point for Levi. Like, he's like, oh, I can do anything, you know?
Yeah. And maybe part of it was him fearing the outside world and wanting to keep what Cooper had built. There did seem to be quite a bit of pressure on him to like maintain this community, but like practicing hypnosis on the supposed love of your life and making her blind so she would never leave you, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There was like no, I don't even want to say there's no redeeming his character. You know what I'm going to say? There's no redeeming his character. Like, I don't know. There's nothing he could do after what he's done. Because also the issue is B seems to be over him, but also gets like swept up in being with him. But it's like moments where he's touching her or like talking to her that she starts to feel that way. So it's like, is she still in love with him, or has he been manipulating her and is manipulating her now so that he can like keep sleeping with her, or like so that she lets her guard down, or like does any of this stuff? And it's so gross. Like, it's so disgusting.
I feel like they're not really separable, and that's part of why it's so gross. I think at a point where like he has to implement any manipulation to get what he wants out of the relationship, then the love just like ceases to matter. But yeah, like she will never, I don't know, maybe she does feel different about it, but I don't, at least in the moment, she can't distinguish those things, right? Like she's under the spell, so.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like that's not a big enough deal in the book. Like, she obviously kills him eventually, which like good for you, but her like mentality of it is, I'm going to have this daughter and I'm going to look at her and only think of her and how she's mine, and I'm not going to think of you, which is such a healthy mindset to have, to be honest. But like, this man was your abuser for like basically your entire life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've basically also been sexually assaulted, even if it didn't happen like explicitly within the book. Like, that is how their relationship has kind of been tainted now, because there is no way to tell what was genuine and what wasn't.
Yeah. You can never remove that manipulative part.
Exactly. So I'm glad she has the healthy mindset she does at the end of this book, but like, I feel like we take some leaps to get there.
Mm-hmm.
We could have sat with all of this, I feel like, a little bit longer. Perhaps the disservice of having 3 main characters and trying to deal with all of them with such different storylines, that does tend to happen. I feel like we've talked about books where that's happened before, but yeah.
Well, I think another interesting interaction they have is Levi mentions, he's like, I gave you a sister, which, as though that wasn't like an act of manipulation. But I thought this is another part where I'm like kind of picking at, did Levi make a bad move for his own intentions? Because why would he decide to kind of match B up with Theo and Calla, knowing that they were like recent outsiders, when B's whole thing is, I want to go to the outside? Like, he's so afraid of her leaving. And I understand he's recently brainwashed these folks, but I feel like it's the riskiest people for him to partner her with.
he did trust B to tell him things, so maybe if anything was ever odd with Calla, she would have said something to him about it. Like, maybe they had that kind of relationship.
That's a good point, right? Because given that Levi and B are so close, he might be treating her a bit like a spy in that case.
Yeah. And then, like, simple answer might be, like, there might actually be a part of him that does love her and, like, wanted her to have a family. Especially if he knew he could never be that family. I feel like that's giving him too much humanity, but I suppose that could also be an answer.
Yeah. I think there's at least a version of this where, like, he started out loving her, and so, like, there's some actions he could be taking that are informed by that. It doesn't overwrite, like, at all the manipulation part and, like, the controlling features that take him over, but I could at least see there being, like, maybe habit or just, like, yeah, kind of underlying, like, well, I at least loved her, and so I feel like these are the things I'm supposed to do because I loved her, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, sometime after they start making moves to leave, so Calla decides they should head out. It's the group of the three of them, really, that are going to do it, though. Calla, Theo, and B. But B is, like, putting her foot down, like, no, like, I'm not leaving here unless we bring Colette and her baby with us.
Which is, like, fair enough, I think.
It was kind of the catalyst to this.
Yeah, obviously, like, their hand is forced here, but it is also a little crazy that Colette, who just gave birth, and this baby, who I think it's, a heart condition or something?
It is,
like,
yeah.
I mean, first of all, they almost get burned alive, so that's crazy. But then they trek through the woods in, like, the middle of the night, and it's like, they come out fine, to be honest. But getting ahead of myself there, I guess. B is like, we need to take Colette and the baby, which I agree. I think it causes them to separate as a group.
Yeah.
Which seemed fine at first, but then B decides to leave Colette and her baby, which seemed like a mistake, especially because Faye is right there, knowing about your plan to leave. And I don't know if I trust Faye yet, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't even matter because she's going to Levi anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because B decides to go and see Levi. Or is it... No, she's not planning to see him, but she's planning to leave, like, the pressed daisy he had given her or whatever as, like, a fuck you, I'm out of here type of thing. And it's like, girl, just leave. Don't tell him anything.
It was another case where I was like, stop going to Levi's. Everyone stop talking to Levi, please.
Yeah, like, obviously there's something off about him. Like, we're not getting clear confirmation that he's hypnotizing people at this point. But, you know... He did just murder 2 people.
Yeah.
And also, you're carrying his kid, but also he doesn't give a shit about you. So, like, maybe we should stay away from him?
Yes, honestly.
That feels like the best option.
I think it's pretty established at this point that he's not to be trusted also. So why would you play with that?
Also, B, is it at this point, B has, like, maybe slept with him, I don't know, spent the night with him, and then she wakes up in the woods. And it's like, you're going back to his house?
Right. I did want to talk about Colette for a second before we move on too much, because... First of all, I do, even though I was wrong about Colette being the one who is Maggie, I do feel a bit vindicated in the fact that she continues to be a relevant and important character to some degree in this book. I thought it was one thing that I thought was interesting about kind of the commitment to Colette with B was I feel like there is kind of a larger connection between the two beyond the fact that B has been around for all of Colette's like pre-birth stuff. So like one thing being here that like Colette, obviously she just like lost her husband to the whole ritual thing, whereas like she's kind of in the process of losing Levi, but by the end of the book also loses Levi, also by her own hand, but she has already lost him at that point. And then B also has kind of this connection with the child because Colette just had this child. B knows she's pregnant now, so I feel like she feels connected for that. There's also the like potential loss that they're both dealing with. So like Levi has admitted admits shortly after this that Calla isn't actually her like biological sister, and so in a sense she's having this other relationship taken away from her in the same way that like Colette is very close to losing her baby and having that taken away from her. So I just feel like there's like a lot of loss connection, relationship connection between these two characters that maybe like extra informs why B is attached to bringing Colette along.
Yeah, I definitely think Colette is the catalyst for the B storyline for sure, especially because B isn't as involved in the Travis and Maggie storyline. So like this is B's side of the story. It makes sense. I wish Colette was an actual character.
Yeah.
Rather than just like a device, because basically that's what she is.
That's what she is.
Like her pregnancy and her birth and her husband cause all of these things to happen, but she doesn't actually get much agency in what's going on. She doesn't even get to decide to leave on her own. It's kind of decided for her. Like, we don't even know if she knows her husband is dead. I don't know if we ever get that confirmation.
That's a good point.
When we figure out she has also been missing for a large number of years, we don't get to hear her opinion on any of that.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of just disappears back to her old husband, whoever that is, and we don't know anything about it. So it is like, there are a lot of parallels in this book, Colette and Bee being one of them. Obviously, the Foxtail books and what Maggie goes through are also quite paralleled, even though Maggie is writing them about the farm girl in particular. Like, there's a lot of parallels set up in the book. I don't know if they're all given as much depth as they could be, but I definitely see what you're seeing here.
Yeah, there was another like minor parallelism too between Colette having her baby, but that baby's never going to know its biological father, the same way that Maggie wouldn't either, because she's not able to get there before Cooper is dead.
Yeah. I honestly, bringing that up, like, yeah, nothing is really done with that. It is interesting, though, because, like, I do wonder if Levi knew that, and also if he didn't, like, how that might have changed the story. Because it's like, I don't know how this commune was built, but if Maggie had met Cooper, would he have wanted, like, her, like, how would that relationship have been? Like, what kind of power would Maggie have had in Pastoral as, like, the founder's daughter, right? Like, it's not necessarily a bloodline thing going on in that town, but also it could have been. We don't know. We didn't have, like, any of that going on. Did Levi feel threatened by Maggie? Did he even know? Like, we don't know any of those things.
That's interesting, yeah.
It would have been interesting. Because, like, if he was threatened by her, why did he not just kill her? Like, that's the thought, right? Unless he did care about Cooper enough to want to keep his daughter alive, I guess. I don't know. There's, like, interesting depth that could have been given to these characters and character relationships, but, you know.
Yeah. There's only so much book to have.
Yeah, I feel like there's 2 different books inside of this book. Technically 3. Travis's Magic could have been its own book. Maggie wanting to find out about herself and how she eventually became Calla, and, like, that whole experience could have been a book. And then Bee's whole situation with Levi and the cult and the rat, that could have been a book. But we're in the weeds. We kind of talked about the hypnosis bit, but Bee being in that closet is where she finds his secret books, which talk about magic and hypnosis, and it's where she has her brain blast, obviously. So they end up meeting together with, like we said, Birthing Hut on fire, Colette, baby, Faye, they're fine.
That, actually, let me just say, the baby surviving that is the most unbelievable part of this book.
Oh, absolutely. Like, the baby making it to the hospital and then also being okay, like smoke inhalation.
Yes, that part, yeah.
Crazy. But we'll believe it. And they run into Parker, who is obviously quite ready to shoot them. Theo and Parker get into a scuffle. Calla ends up getting shot. And Levi's watching like a creep from the woods. And then Bee goes after Levi.
But this is where, like, their sort of last stand happens, right? Like, it's the reckoning and Bee calling him out for behavior. But Levi does have a pretty good hold over her before she's able to, like, pull out the knife and start fighting back in that regard.
Oh, yeah, he is killing her in this moment. Like, he is choking her to death. And then, yeah, she kind of has to struggle to stab him. And honestly, good for her.
I was so afraid she wasn't, like, going to go all the way through with it. Like, just given how much hesitance there is throughout this book, I was so worried that she wasn't going to, like, seal the deal on it. But I think given the escalation that Levi had, that she felt emboldened to do that.
There was also a part of me that thought maybe she would stab him to get away from him and then go back with the group and run away and all of this stuff. And it would have, I'm glad that didn't happen, because that would have been awful.
Yeah, I was afraid of a version of this book ending where Levi is still in charge.
Yes, yeah, for sure. It also would have made this scene, like, feel so unnecessary, because it's basically the villain's monologue. Like, Levi lays out everything he's done, and like we get clear confirmation of what he's done and all of this stuff. And then if she had not killed him in this moment, it would have just been the villain's monologue.
Yeah.
But at least we got some revenge.
Yeah,
avenging.
Really. I feel like it was another moment where I was like, oh man, I think I was rooting for this character to die again. It was like, oh no, I try not to root for people to die, but man, yeah, I was definitely on this one.
Yeah, there was just no scenario in which Levi can survive. But murder aside, B does decide to stay.
Crazy that like it's like immediately after, right? Like she kills him and then she's like, and now I'll stay here forever. It's like, wait, what? Like she spends her whole life wanting to like see the outside world. She reads about New York. She's like, I'm about it. Like, let me get out of here. But like the only thing stopping me is being blind. Now that I'm not blind, I'm not going to do it. That part was upsetting to me. And it makes a lot of sense for her to become the next leader and all that. I would like to see a gap year, you know?
A gap year. That's crazy. To be fair, like, I also thought it was insane just because, like, even if you try to convince yourself it made sense, because Levi has kind of been, like, it's kind of been set up that B has been helping to lead this entire time, and, like, Levi has always been afraid of how much power B has. So, like, that makes sense in the book. But, yeah, like you said, she's always wanted to leave, but also she does this, and then what? Like, this is the last B chapter we get, everybody. I think so anyway.
Yeah,
I guess
sure.
it is. But she does this, and it's like, I guess I'm leader now.
Yeah.
We don't see that. We don't see how she deals with having just killed the old leader. Like,
and like people accepting her.
Who can say? Who can say what happens in this scenario? It doesn't really matter, I guess.
I didn't even think about the fact that they're not going to be hypnotized anymore. I guess not directly.
Right. It's like, what is coming off of that? Like if everybody here has been stolen or like had their memories changed in some way, what are we doing about that? Like, how are we processing that? Oh, the rot doesn't exist. We just killed 2 guys like 5 days ago. Like,
right.
How are we dealing with that guilt? Like, there are so many things happening after this last chapter that I feel like need to be talked about.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I can understand why it wasn't included, because it's so much. That would be so much resolution, but I would want to know.
Right. I feel like it's necessary resolution, but we have two different plots going on here, right? We have the Maggie storyline and we have the cult storyline that they happen to intersect, but like actually they don't involve each other that much at all. The Maggie storyline could have happened front and center, and then the cult storyline could have been like, okay, B kills the leader, and then they dissolve the cult. And, like, police come in, and everybody's helped, and everybody's saved, and that's the end of the story. That would have made sense. I thought that's where it was going, to be honest.
Yeah, at least with the police intervention part.
Right. Instead, we got, like, the Maggie storyline, and then the cult storyline kind of took front and center in a way in which, like, the cult reformed back to being a commune, and, like, things are good again. But we don't see any of that reformation.
Yeah.
We just kind of accept that it happened. But it's like, if you're going to make that important to the story and to your characters wanting to stay there, it feels like we should talk about that development a little bit.
Yeah. Now, I know there's been some times in the past where we've read a book and felt like things have been over-explained. You don't feel like that would have been at risk for that?
No, because I feel like for the arc of this story, which is like cleansing this cult, basically, reverting people's memories and like saving it to bring it back to its prime, like we do the dark cult bit and kill the old leader, and then we don't do any of the after stuff. We don't even have the scene where people see the old leader and like their memories are sort of coming back, and like we don't see any of that transition, or even any of that transition kind of hinted at in any way. We just do like a quick cut, and like in between all of that is the Maggie stuff. So I feel like it's just like a storyline that's not complete in a way.
Yeah, I get that. And I think I agree.
I feel like there's room to deal with B, who is the outcast, right? She's the outcast of the town. Now she's the leader. Like, it's not like she's primed to be the next leader. So it's like there's room for that to be explored, and like her getting her sight back, and like her relationship with Calla, like all of these things could have been given time after the Levi death, and I think it would have filled things out a bit within that storyline. But yeah, I do think it was an issue of like two larger storylines kind of fighting for relevancy, and then poor Travis kind of left to the side.
Yeah,
I don't know what to tell you.
I was a little underwhelmed by that Travis ending.
Yeah, but before all of that, I guess B's storyline is basically over, but we still do have Calla and Theo who leave, get to the outside. Like we mentioned, Colette kind of is fine. Her baby, fine. She goes back home with her husband. Love that for her, I guess. I hope he's a good man.
I know, because not with the amnesia and all.
I know, yeah. I would assume so, considering it's been like 11 years and he still came to find her. Like, that seems hopeful.
Moved on, for sure. So that's crazy.
Yeah. So that might be good. Calla is in the hospital for like a day and then let out.
Yeah. Sorry, she was only shot.
She was, only shot in the stomach. It doesn't matter. Theo is questioned by the police, but he like lies about what happened, and he doesn't mention Pastoral.
This part was
I'm confused.
It's another one. They're like keeping secrets again for what? Yeah,
because also you have to think, yes, we the reader know Levi is dead, right? But what do Thea and Calla know?
Yeah,
Levi is still alive.
Yeah, and they're willing to not say anything. Well, they've got these. That's just where their like starry-eyed pastoral begins, right? Where they're like, oh, like we have to protect it though. Like they're still freaking brainwashed here. We have to protect it, even though we know Levi might still be alive and running the damn thing.
Right, and the absolute lack of reaction from the police.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and also Calla's parents is actually crazy to me.
Yeah, I would think that people would like storm the forest, you know.
Right. These are two women, and two famous women, right? Like,
yeah, an actress and an author, yeah.
Yeah.
And a big deal author.
They've been missing for years, and they suddenly come back. One is shot in the stomach.
Right.
And sure, they could say it's a hunting accident, but I feel like that's not enough. A hunting accident, sure.
Yeah, like, where's the context for the hunting if you guys have been gone for, like, years, you know?
Right, and you also are with a woman with smoke inhalation, with a baby, like a newborn baby. What are you talking about, a hunting accident? Like, in what universe would that be accepted? And if it's not accepted, why are these people not being questioned by the police? Mm-hmm. Why are these women not being forced into, like, forced into some kind of therapy, like, to talk about what has happened? Because quite obviously, this woman, Maggie St. James, now thinks her name is Calla. Like, something has happened, right? Something has happened. And the other woman, Colette, thinks her name is Colette and has amnesia and has been missing for, like, 11 years. Like, and that she's been married to somebody else. Like, what is happening here? Why are we just letting these people go?
Why is this so casual?
Why are we not questioning them? Right. For sure. Like, why is this so casual? And I get Calla's parents are probably a bit more casual because they don't want to overwhelm her. But, like, that's your daughter that's been missing for, like, 7 years. And I get the mother probably doesn't give a fuck because fuck her, to be honest.
Yeah,
but, like, the father seemed to have loved her and has been searching for her the entire time. Where's his reaction? Where's his moment? Like, he does not matter at all here. It's so crazy. Like, your daughter comes back, new name, married to this man that you sent to find her. What is happening here? Like, what is happening here? But you know what? Who cares?
Doesn't the world also know that Pastoral exists? Because they've only been offline for like 10 years, but like people interacted with them.
You would think, right? Like, we have Travis finding the article at the beginning of the book and like talking about this mysterious commune that bought the land and like, but that's all, yeah, when Cooper is still alive and when they're still kind of chill. I guess they're not making news by just being a commune in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, it's not like they were an ancient civilization hidden from everybody for like 100 years.
Wouldn't be hard information to connect.
Right. I could believe the small town might not talk about it because it's a small town. That's possible. But like the fact that it hasn't been found. I think I saw a review actually that was like, why is there no like satellite information?
Right.
About this big ass town in the middle of the woods.
That's a good point.
You would see even if it was just a small campsite, like, you would see it,
Mhm.
presumably. So how did the police not have access to it? Like, when Maggie went missing, like, they knew where she was, like, what forest she was near. How would they not find it?
Yeah,
to be
actually,
honest?
the connection would be really obvious, right?
Right. Even if they didn't know it was Pastoral, you could see, like, get a view of the woods and be like, what is this weird ass town in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere
Yeah.
that's kind of close to this farmhouse where we think she was murdered? Like, there
I
are
just can't
connections that
believe-
could be made.
I can't believe that Pastoral is like wiped from the local memory. Like, and I know there's memory things in this book, but truly 10 years is not a long time for a community, and like for, I'm sure, all of the adults who are several decades old in that community. Like, it's not a long time. There's no way. It doesn't make any sense unless Levi is really that good at his job, like, that everyone would have just forgotten and not been able to make that connection. And certainly Maggie's mom has.
Yeah, and her keeping that for the 7 years and not saying it, like, crazy to me. I get she thinks. Actually, do you want to just talk about the mom? Let's just talk about the mom.
Yeah.
You know what? Fuck it. The mom ends up, like, having a private conversation with Calla and is like, you were born in Pastoral. I used to tell you all the stories of that place, like the farm girl story and all of that stuff. And we basically get direct confirmation, because we don't need to assume anything here, that the Foxtail books were based off of those stories. We get, like, information about how the mom cheated, right, on her husband with Cooper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And had Calla because of that. Lived in Pastoral for a little bit of time. So Calla was born in Pastoral. That was a correct memory, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mom ended up leaving because it was weird. It's a commune. It was probably a little strange. And then her husband took her back, I guess, and also took in this baby that clearly was not his, but pretended it basically was. And so the mom decided to be exceedingly distant and neglectful and hate her daughter for no fucking reason.
Yep.
And so Maggie had wanted to go to Pastoral to try and find her birth father and, like, figure out her past, that kind of stuff. But yeah, she wasn't planning to stay there. But the mom was kind of like, maybe you had found it and you had liked it there and I didn't want to stop you. And it's like, okay, I can understand that logic. But also like, you're lying to your husband about what happened to me. People think I got murdered, you know? Like,
Right.
People think I died 7 years ago. Like, they think terrible things happened to me. But you know exactly where I am. And you're just not even telling the man you're married to, who seems like a great guy, to be honest. Like, I'm so confused.
And in her version of Pastoral, the borders aren't closed. Like, why would there never be an attempt of contact?
Right.
And she's like, oh, I don't love your brother more than you. I just decided to not talk to you for 7 years. Because effectively, that's the decision she made.
Right. It's actually crazy. Like, I can understand the mom doesn't want to go to Pastoral because feelings, right? Like, that's her past. She doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't want to look at it. Whatever. But, like, your daughter is there and has been there in a place that's weird but has open borders, presumably. And you haven't seen her, and everybody thinks she's dead. So, like, maybe you do go. Maybe you get over yourself and you go see her. Like, I don't know what to tell you here. But yeah, this scene was so weird. Like, it was a necessity, obviously, because we needed to figure out what was happening with the Foxtail books. But, like, it was also not necessary. Like, I feel like it was needlessly complicated because we needed to give Maggie some reason to go to Pastoral,
Right.
But, like, Cooper leaving Pastoral to, like, hook up with the mom going to Pastoral, her leaving Pastoral, like, her telling the Pastoral stories that would form the Foxtail books, like, so that they could be excerpts in this book. Like, I don't know. It was, and then all of that not being, like, hinted at, or, like, it's not like Calla has, like, memories of these things happening throughout the book, which could have been interesting. Instead, it's kind of just all dumped on you at the very end. And it's like, oh, remember, you know, those Foxtail books? Remember why you went to Pastoral? I'm just going to tell you all of it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, great. Thanks, Mom.
I was definitely frustrated reading this part of the book, and, like, it's like, I don't like this character. I don't like the mom at all. And then Calla was like, well, like, maybe I should, like, maybe I can give her some credit. I don't even remember what the reason was, but she did the whole, like, oh, I shouldn't blame her thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, blame her. It's okay to blame her. Blame Levi for what he did and blame your mom for what she did.
Because this relationship is also, I mean, it's toxic. Like, your mom is abusive. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Mhm.
Like, she hasn't been there for you her entire life. She lied to you. She also lied about where you were, and everybody thought you were dead. Like, that's not something you should do either. Especially based off a hunch. Like, she does not know you are fine. She is assuming you're fine. So, that's great. But the end of this book also just having, like, her mom come and go from Pastoral at the end because the borders are open again, as if everything is fine.
Right, now she comes.
Oh my god. I was livid. I was so fucking mad.
I get it. I understand being mad because I just didn't understand why they went back to begin with, honestly.
Right. Okay, so the end. They do decide they want to go back to Pastoral, but before we do that, I do have one little bit I want to mention. Sure. Theo remembers he has a sister, and he's obviously caught up in that a bit because, as we know from the beginning of the book, Ruth did take her own life. Made sure Travis experienced that with her, which was a little dark of her, but okay. So he suddenly remembers that, and he is, like, struck by it in that moment. But then he goes on to say that forgetting and being in Pastoral allowed him to heal. And I would just like to say, that's fucking bullshit. Mental wounds are not physical ones. Just because you let it set, and I would say even for physical wounds, this isn't really the case, but the idea that time heals all wounds, that is not true. You actively need to do something.
At least be present for it. Like, if time is going to heal, it needs to actually be in the background.
Right. Like, the issue with losing your memories is you have lost that time. Like, there is no time that has passed between when you entered Pastoral 2 years ago and this very moment. Like, that is a gap of your time. You have not actively done anything to heal that wound. You haven't done anything to process that grief. It's an absence, right? Like, a complete absence of time. There's no scenario in which you would heal in the way he is saying he has healed. He might have, like, distanced himself from it.
I think that's more what it is.
But that's not healing. Like, Pastoral did not heal you.
The only way this works in my head, and I'm not sure this is really what the author was intending, was that, like, because I do think the author kind of intentionally wrote them as still brainwashed somewhat in this last section, but the only way this works for me is that he just doesn't really feel enough like himself to even really feel connected to that event, and so he remembers it, but he doesn't really remember it like Travis would remember it, and so he's like, oh, I must be healed because I'm not, like, depressed about it. But over time, as he, like, remembers who he is more and becomes more connected with Travis as a person, he's going to feel less healed because he's going to remember it in that way more.
And that's a good way to look at it, yeah. I think the issue is the author was trying to give a hopeful ending for the end of this book. I don't think it's like Jane Lawrence where it's like something is still wrong, right? Like,
yeah, I agree.
There is still a horror going on. I feel like the death of Levi was pretty much like, the horror has been cleansed. Now we are a part of nature. Things are good again. Let's heal. Like, I think that's the ending of this book. So what you're saying would make sense if they were still kind of some sort of horror aspect, or even if there was a bit more time given to realize that these characters are still traumatized, but it's almost like we're supposed to believe they're completely fine and they're acting in their right mind, and they're not.
I mean, they definitely aren't, but I don't know if I get the sense that we're supposed to believe that they are. Like, to me, the way they're behaving is, at least the ones who are actually there, Theo and Calla, like, they are behaving how I would expect someone fresh out of this situation to behave, which is, like, confused, uncomfortable, and a little sympathetic to where they came from. So, I don't know, to me it makes sense. Like, I think there is a tone of healing, but I think, like, them, especially them going back and stuff, like, it's because they don't really know better still. Like, they don't know how to make a fully conscious decision as their former selves yet, and so, like, this is of course the decision that they're gonna make, but we can still see a path of them doing that where healing occurs because the community has changed. I still think that they're intentionally written, though, to be, like, not all there yet.
It's just a mess because we do kind of get them talking about Pastoral as if it was a beautiful place. Like, we need to go back because it was like the best place for us and like all of that kind of stuff. And because they get absolutely no pushback in this decision, like if they are not acting in their right mind, there needs to be somebody here talking about that, like telling them that. The family lets them go. The police let them go. Like, nothing is done with them acting like this. So if it is like the unhealthy decision for them in this moment, they're allowed to do it. And you know what? The end of this book makes it seem like they made the right choice because they're there and they're seemingly happy, and Calla's family is there and visiting her, and it seems like everything's great. So it's like, yeah, maybe they're not all there here, where Theo is thinking about Ruth and like they're deciding to go back, but they get no pushback for thinking this way, and we see no pushback for them thinking this way. We just get them having a happy ending. So it's like, clearly they're not acting right, but also we're not we're not dealing with that wrongness in any way. If anything, we're accepting it. Like, we're letting them be unhealthy. That is the end of this book. They get to be happy in their unhealthy environment.
Yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. Yeah, you would totally expect at least something. All right. I'll give that to you, but I still think they were written to be out of it. I think maybe that's more of an oversight than anything. But I do think that would be more logical, is to see the pushback, to see like, oh, like these folks are not in their right mind. We can't let them do that.
Right, because it's like, I get the idea of the end of this book, right? Like, a pastoral that is a simpler life, and you're not caught up in social media and technology and like all the crazy shit that's happening in this world. Like, that makes sense. That is the point of Pastoral. Sure, I get it. But they're clearly brainwashed. We've accepted they're brainwashed. And also the Pastoral we've experienced throughout this entire book has been awful. They can't go into the rain or they'll die. They can't go into the forest or they'll die. If they get caught by their leader, they'll get buried and then executed.
Yeah. The part that would make this better is if we did get a bit more of those other characters being fleshed out, maybe like more Colette or just like side characters, and got a better sense that their community was a positive one outside of Levi, which I think is kind of the implication that they're trying to make, is like, no, like this was a community, like we did care about each other, but we were just here for the problem part. So we never really got that established for us.
Yeah. And we do get some bits of like flowery language where they're like picking the lemons and floating in the river and like all of these things, which are quite, you know, simple and like beautiful and like good times. But yet town wise, the town sucks a little bit. Like Lily Mae is talking shit about Bee and Levi having a relationship, and, you know, Birdie is lying about her son possibly having the rot, which might kill everyone. And we just killed 2 people and everybody just kind of stood around while we did it. So it's like, and yes, some of that is hypnosis, but like, what else are these people like? Like, we don't know anything about this place.
Yeah, we have no evidence to support what they're saying.
Right. I had a very negative experience with the end of this book, between like Theo basically not getting an ending in any way. Like, he doesn't talk to Ben. We don't even like get really a chapter about him dealing with his own problems, even though he also has been missing. We don't get anything about that. And then them deciding to go back as if Pastoral was a great place and wasn't traumatic for them. Like, I get they were hypnotized, and I get if it wasn't for the hypnosis part, Pastoral probably was a great place for them, but like, they were traumatized. Like, they had to watch people be executed. Like, they went through traumatic things and heard traumatic things. And it's like, I feel like that just was right. And I feel like that's just not taken seriously within this book.
I'm seeing what you're putting down there.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm making it worse for you. I'm
it's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I get what you're saying for sure. Hopefully, I guess that means that like in the future, though, these characters would like wake up a little bit more on that, be like, I guess if we want this, it doesn't have to be this specific thing right here with these people. Find positive community in their lives elsewhere, or even start another commune if you really want that to be the way you do things. But maybe like further iterations of Pastoral isn't it. I even had like the passing thought of, you know, let's make the assumption that Cooper was a pretty good guy, but he raised Levi and he didn't turn out so well. Like, who's to say that the same exact thing isn't about to happen with Bea and her future child? Like, maybe the pastoral vibes are just bad.
You just need one person to want to be in control, and then you're in a cult, and sorry.
Yep.
And apparently anybody can learn hypnosis, so fucking watch out, I guess.
Well, I won't think too much about that one.
Review-wise, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can go first. I think despite some of the conversation we've had here, I'm going to maintain the review score that I came in with, because I did enjoy the book overall, like reading experience wise, especially. Again, like I said, there are some parts that I found a little questionable, but for the most part, I thought it was a good time to read and an interesting space to explore as far as like the cult stuff. So I'm going to give it a 4.
Okay, I thought that was coming, to be honest. For me, I actually had to look back at like what I had rated some other stuff for this show, because I was like, ooh, how bad did I actually think it was?
For the consistency, yeah.
Yeah, because again, the issue was like most of the book was pretty fun to read. I liked the mysteries that were going on, but then yeah, it's just the end that kind of ruined it for me, which has happened before. So I think for me, I am just going to give it a 3.
That makes sense.
I liked it, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can just do a good vibe for this one. I feel like, yeah, especially after that end conversation, I talked a lot of shit. So a good vibe might be necessary, to be honest. Would you like to go first again?
Sure, yeah. I think my good vibe, and I just touched on it a hair in the review, but I think tackling a book about a cult is like, it's a cool idea, and definitely seems like a lot of work had to go into setting up like what Pastoral would be, like what's the vibe of this community. It's such that, you know, because if you get a cult story, like you kind of already maybe know that the leader is the bad guy in the story. So it was like cool to see like what is the setup of this particular community? Why is this particular thing wrong? What is the angle we're coming from? So I don't know. I thought despite some of the things that I had trouble with, like for the most part, the author did a really good job of setting up that world, and I thought it was interesting to learn more about, and it made me want to read more cult-centered books.
Yeah, I think I can definitely agree with that. I think it was really interesting early on seeing kind of, I mean, if we ignore the hypnosis, seeing the way he was able to manipulate. Like, we saw it in real time with Calla, right? Like, he would say something and then she would feel safer because he had said it. And I think it's passed off as hypnosis in this, but, like, that is something that occurs.
Yeah, it's realistic.
It's definitely realistic, especially in, like, cults and things like that. So those bits were definitely interesting to read, because I didn't think that was the magic bit,
right? Yeah,
or the hypnosis bit. I thought that was just normal cult leader-esque things happening. So I feel like, yeah, those things were quite well done.
Kind of interesting to make the thing that makes a cult leader like that work the tool, right?
Mm-hmm. I think for my good vibe, it might be the other end of what you're talking about. You're thinking of the cult. I'm gonna think of kind of the Travis Maggie storyline. I might touch more so on the Travis bit. The prologue was a bit info dumpy at times, but I think it was an interesting setup and also felt so jarring from the rest of the book. It was a interesting way to start the book, and I also did think his talent, or his magic, whatever you want to call it, was an interesting aspect of the book. I read a review where somebody said it was kind of like a video game mechanic, and honestly, yeah, I saw that.
I agree with that a lot.
Yeah, it for sure, like, as soon as they said that, it reminded me of this one game called The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which I really love that game. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of similar, like, you see flashes and kind of put things in order, and it's a very interesting game. But I kind of wish there had been a bit more of that. And then, to expand a bit on it, like, the kind of normal investigation going on here was a good one. Like, what happened to Travis, what happened to Maggie, the book being buried. Like, there were interesting clues being left.
Mm-hmm. The mystery itself, was engaging to a degree.
Yeah, especially with that idea of these people were in our sunroom and we didn't know about them. Like, that could have been very unsettling. Right. But, yeah, that was interesting. 2 interesting ideas in this book.
I agree. Well, shall we talk about what is coming next?
We are reading a book neither of us have on hand, so we're guessing with the halfway point, and we'll see what happens, I guess. We've done this before. Nothing has ever gone wrong. So we are reading How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. up to, but not including, chapter 24. This book is supposed to be a cozy mystery, but also it's another mystery thriller, so there might be some things, but hopefully a little bit lighter. Yeah. It's also the first in a series, which we try to stay away from series, but cozy mysteries usually wrap up pretty well, so we think it'll be okay.
Yeah. I'm excited to return to maybe more of a murder mystery genre book after this one.
Yeah. So that's for next time. Obviously, if you have your own thoughts and theories about this book, about the How to Solve Your Own Murder book, the Twitter is 5050_books. We also have the Goodreads and the YouTube, and I'm sure you could leave reviews on Apple or leave notes on Spotify or do whatever, wherever, whatever. I don't know everything. I'm a lurker. I don't post anything ever. So if you're one of those, I'm right there with you. But that's going to be it for this book. And see you on the flip side, John.
See you on the flip side.